I'll tell you a story about the evening my grandson reached for my hand, and with a few quiet sentences, turned my understanding of the world on its head. It sounds simple, just a walk, a handhold, a conversation, but the way a truth arrives can redraw everything you thought you knew about strength, love, and what it means to show up for someone. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now, before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years. It began on a late autumn afternoon in our small Midwestern town. The kind of day where the air smells of dry leaves and chimney smoke, and the sun falls early, like it's tired from the week. I had just set a pot of soup to simmer, chicken and rice, his favorite, when Eli knocked, politely as ever, though he doesn't need to. He's 17 now, tall as the doorway, but still careful with his voice around me, as if words could bruise porcelain. "Grandma," he said, slipping in and setting his backpack by the wall. "Could we walk before dinner?" He tried on a smile that didn't quite fit. We took the long loop behind my house, past the creek and the big sycamore that leans like an old actor taking a bow. The trail was carpeted in bronze and gold, and every step sounded like a page turning. He walked beside me, a little closer than usual. The sky had begun that lavender drift that makes you think of postcards and promises. I asked about school. He answered, but in the clipped, careful way of someone holding a door closed with their foot. Finally, at the bend where the creek narrows and the wind always gathers, he reached for my hand. His palm was cool, a little damp, and he held on as if the path might tilt without warning. "Grandma," he said, "I did something today, and I don't know if it was right, but it felt like the only thing." "Tell me," I said, and the wind lifted the leaves like small applause. He swallowed. "Coach is mad. I missed practice. It was the last one before the game." He paused, searching my face for a verdict. "But Ben," he asked if I could walk home with him. He didn't want to go alone. I knew the name, Ben from his English class, quiet, always with a book. I pictured the boy's narrow shoulders, the nervous smile that peeks out like a moon from clouds. Why didn't he want to go alone? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Eli's grip tightened. His dad's been out of work for months. Things are loud at home. He's been eating lunch in the library. He said today felt heavy, like the kind of day where you need someone to stand next to you, even if they can't fix anything. We stopped to let a pair of joggers pass, and when they were gone, the creek's murmuring filled the space between us. Eli stared at the water as if it might answer. Coach said commitments are commitments, but Ben looked at me like a person tossed a rope into a river. So I told Coach I was sick. I walked Ben home. We sat on his porch steps until the shouting quieted. He fell silent. A hawk traced a slow circle overhead. I felt the old ache in my knees and the new ache in my chest, the one that comes when a child shows you he's growing, not away from you, but towards something truer. "And now you're wondering what kind of man that makes you," I said. Eli nodded without looking up. "I don't want to let people down, but sometimes it feels like the rule book and the heart don't agree." I squeezed his hand. The first stars were waking, faint and brave. "Rules tell us how to move together," I said. "But the heart tells us why we bother moving at all." He finally met my eyes, and I saw it, the question that would shape what came next. The path home looked the same as always, but I knew it wasn't. Not anymore. The next evening, Eli came over again, his knock softer this time, as if he didn't want to disturb the quiet hum of my old house. I had just finished folding laundry, and the scent of fresh cotton still lingered in the living room. When I opened the door, his face carried that same thoughtful weight from the night before, but there was also a spark of relief in his eyes, like he had been waiting for a safe place to let the rest of his thoughts breathe. We sat at the kitchen table, the one with faint scratches from years of family meals, homework sessions, and countless coffee cups set down too firmly. Eli leaned forward, elbows on the wood, tracing a faint line in the grain with his fingertip. "Grandma, do you ever wonder if one choice can change everything?" he asked, his voice barely louder than the clock ticking on the wall. I smiled gently, knowing he wasn't asking about trivial things like what soup to make for dinner. "Yes," I said, pouring us each a glass of water. "I've asked myself that more than once." "Why?" He exhaled and looked down, his voice steady but filled with something deeper. "Yesterday, after I walked Ben home, I couldn't stop thinking about how different life feels when you see someone carrying a weight, and you choose not to look away." The way he said it, with such quiet conviction, it felt like he was older than 17 in that moment. I listened, letting him unravel it piece by piece. "Coach pulled me aside today," he continued. "He told me I have leadership potential, but leaders don't skip practice. He said I can't let my teammates down." Ayla's eyes lifted to mine, filled with both doubt and defiance. "But Grandma, how could I have left Ben? How can I chase a ball while someone I care about is sitting alone in the dark?" I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. His fingers were long, calloused from years of basketball, but underneath, he was still the boy who once clung to my leg at the grocery store because he was afraid of getting lost. "You didn't skip leadership," I told him softly. "You lived it. Sometimes being a leader isn't about the scoreboard. It's about deciding whose well-being matters in the moment." He was quiet for a long time. Outside, the wind rattled the branches against the window, and I could smell the soup still simmering on the stove. Finally, Eli squeezed my hand. "I think I understand," he said, "but it doesn't stop me from worrying that maybe I'll regret it later, that maybe I'll wish I had done what was expected." I leaned back, watching his face, the crease in his brow, the earnest struggle between what the world told him to do and what his heart whispered. "Regret doesn't come from kindness," I said. "It comes from the moments we let pass without acting." His eyes softened, and he nodded. "You always make it sound so simple." "Life isn't simple," I reminded him. "But the truths we live by can be." The kettle whistled then, sharp and sudden, breaking the heaviness between us. I poured tea, and for a while we just sat together, sipping in silence. It wasn't the silence of absence, but of trust, the kind where words don't need to carry all the meaning because the presence itself does. Later, when he stood to leave, Eli hugged me tighter than usual. As the door clicked shut behind him, I stayed in the kitchen, the faint warmth of his hug lingering. I realized then that this was one of those rare evenings where you know, even as it happens, that you'll carry the memory with you forever, not because of what was solved, but because of what was shared. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of what he wanted to tell me. The following Saturday morning carried with it a pale sun, the kind that glows gently through the curtains without insisting you hurry out of bed. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee when I heard Eli's knock again. It was different this time, firm, urgent, almost like he was asking permission to bring a storm inside. He came in without much of a smile, backpack slung across one shoulder, his hair a little messy as though he hadn't slept well. I motioned for him to sit, but he shook his head. "Grandma," he said, his voice low and heavy, "can we walk again? I need to talk." So we did. The path behind the house had changed since the last time, the leaves now darker, softer underfoot, and the air sharper with the coming winter. He didn't speak for the first few minutes, and I let the silence carry us, knowing the weight of words often needs room before it can fall. Finally, at the curve where the creek widens, he stopped. He shoved his hands into his pockets, stared down at the water. "I lied to you," he whispered. My heart paused. "About what, Ela?" He kicked at the dirt, eyes tight, jaw clenched. "When I told you Ben just wanted someone to walk him home, that wasn't the whole truth. He was scared. He told me things I've never heard from a friend before, and I didn't know what to do with it. I waited, giving him space. He said he thinks about leaving," Eli went on, his voice shaking. "Not just the house, not just school. Leaving everything. He said sometimes the only thing that stops him is knowing I'll walk with him, that maybe I'll notice." The words cracked something inside me, the way ice splits on a frozen pond. I could see the tears gathering in Eli's eyes, though he fought to hold them back. He looked at me then, searching for an anchor. "What if I can't carry that, Grandma? What if I say the wrong thing? What if he slips away anyway?" I reached for his arm, steadying him, steadying myself. "Eli," I said softly, "you don't have to carry him. You just have to stand beside him. Sometimes that's all a person needs to keep walking." He pressed his lips together, nodding, but the fear lingered in his eyes. I told him I'd always be there, but what if I can't keep that promise? What if I fail him? The wind picked up then, tugging at my scarf, and I thought of all the promises we make in life, not to control someone's fate, but to remind them they aren't alone in it. "You won't fail by showing up," I told him. "Even when you can't fix everything, your presence tells him he's worth staying for." For a moment, he closed his eyes, shoulders trembling as though the weight had finally found a place to rest. Then, slowly, he slipped his hand into mine, just like he did that first evening. His grip was stronger this time, though still trembling, and I held on, letting him know I wouldn't let go. We stood there by the water, hand in hand, while the world moved quietly around us, the creek whispering, the trees swaying, the faint cry of a bird somewhere far off. And in that stillness, I realized something. Eli wasn't just protecting his friend. He was learning the deepest lesson life has to offer, that when love asks for our courage, we can answer not with perfection, but with presence. And I knew then that this moment would shape him. It would shape me too. A week later, the first snow came, dusting the streets and rooftops like powdered sugar. I remember standing at the window, the house hushed, the kettle humming softly on the stove. That was when Eli arrived again, his cheeks red from the cold, his breath forming little clouds as he stepped inside. He carried himself differently that day, still heavy, but steadier, as if something inside him had begun to take root. We sat together in the living room, the lamp casting a golden circle on the rug. He pulled off his gloves slowly, thoughtfully, and then turned to me. "Grandma," he said, "I told Ben what you told me, that being there is enough." I thought he might not believe it, but he did. He cried, and then he laughed, and for the first time in weeks, I think he saw himself as worth something. His words made my eyes sting, though I blinked quickly so he wouldn't see. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and spoke with a kind of clarity I hadn't heard before. "It's strange. I always thought strength meant being the best on the court, never missing a practice, keeping my head down and doing what was expected. But now I think strength might just mean standing still with someone in their storm." I reached out and touched his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his breath beneath the wool of his sweater. "That's the kind of strength that doesn't fade," I said. He nodded, then looked at me with an honesty that felt older than his years. I don't think I could have carried this if you hadn't listened. You didn't tell me I was wrong. You didn't tell me to choose one side or the other. You just let me bring it here. My throat tightened. That's what family is, I whispered. Not answers, just a place where the questions don't scare anyone away. We sat quietly after that, the snow still falling outside, muffling the world. Eli reached for my hand again, and this time it wasn't trembling. It was firm, warm, certain. You know, he said, almost smiling, I think I want to study counseling. Or maybe teaching. Something where I can listen the way you do. The words filled the room like light. My grandson, the boy who once built forts out of blankets in my living room, the teenager now wrestling with choices bigger than himself, was talking about building his life on compassion. I squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of years between us and the hope of years still ahead. Whatever you choose, I told him, it will matter. Because you'll be choosing it with your heart, not just your head. We stayed there until the snow deepened and the world outside turned silver. When he finally rose to leave, his steps felt different, rooted, deliberate, like he had found a path that belonged to him. After the door closed, I sat for a long while in the quiet. My heart was full, heavier and lighter all at once. I realized then that his story hadn't just changed him. It had changed me too. It reminded me that no matter our age, we are always still learning what love demands of us, and how powerful it is when we choose to answer. And as I sat there, watching the snow fall steady, I whispered a prayer of gratitude for the boy who held my hand and showed me everything in a new light.